Whether you are prepping for a big meeting or catching up on where the industrial sector is heading, or maybe you're just insanely curious to learn something new today, you are in the right place.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are opening up well, a frankly massive stack of internal corporate documentation.
It is a heavy read, for sure.
Yeah, specifically, we are looking at the sustainability statement for fiscal 2025 from Siemens.
Right.
And our mission for this deep dive is to dissect how a 178-year-old industrial titan,
A legacy titan.
exactly, a company that just reported 78.9 billion euros in revenue, how they managed to pivot their entire global operation toward cutting-edge sustainability.
All while remaining highly profitable, which is the key here.
Yes, exactly.
It is a vital case study for anyone who is tracking industrial transitions. What we have in this fiscal 2025 statement is it's essentially a blueprint.
A blueprint for heavy industry.
Yeah, of how traditional heavy-duty industries are utilizing technology to decouple their economic growth from their resource consumption.
Because we see a lot of companies, treating ESG as a compliance burden.
Right, like a chore. But this document outlines how sustainability is actually being used as a core driver for new revenue streams.
And just to set the stage for you listening, we are not going to be talking about corporate fluff or, basic office recycling programs today.
No, not at all.
If you follow this space, you know that the era of greenwashing is being aggressively regulated out of existence.
Completely phased out.
Right. Instead, we are looking at the actual mechanics. We're talking about utilizing digital twins, leveraging AI open business platforms.
Overhauling massive corporate governance structures.
And literal stress testing of global supply chains against a 4-degree climate warming scenario.
It gets intense.
It really does. So to help synthesize all of this dense data, I am joined by our resident expert.
Glad to be here. The sheer volume of data in this report is, well, it's dense.
Very dense.
But once you map out the reporting structures, you get a very clear picture of how macroeconomic policy is literally forcing structural changes right down to the factory floor.
Let's start with the sheer scale of the operation we are dissecting, because I don't think you can really grasp the scope of these targets without understanding the physical footprint of the company.
It is massive.
Right. Siemens operates with approximately 172,000 employees just in EMEA.
So Europe, the Middle East, and Africa.
Exactly. Plus, they have another 68,500 in the Americas.
And about 77,000 in Asia and Australia.
We are talking about a workforce the size of a small city, spread across the entire globe.
Manufacturing incredibly complex hardware.
Right, from train systems to smart grid infrastructure to hospital equipment. Okay, let's unpack this. How does a decentralized operation of that size even systematically measure its impact?
It's a great question. The report relies heavily on a framework known as the Double Materiality Assessment, or DMA.
Double materiality.
Right. For those familiar with traditional corporate risk assessments, the lens was historically one-directional. It was just single materiality.
Meaning a board of directors would just ask, how does climate change impact our bottom line?
Exactly. Or how does a shifting social dynamic hit our revenue? Double materiality requires a second lens.
The outside-in approach.
It's an inside-out and outside-in approach. It forces the company to formally assess and report on the impact their own operations have on the planet and on society.
But how do you quantify that inside-out impact? Because measuring financial risk to a supply chain, that's standard actuarial math.
Sure.
But putting a strict metric on how a factory impacts a local community seems highly subjective.
It definitely can be, which is why they use a highly rigid scoring methodology to strip out that subjectivity.
How does the scoring work?
They rate these external impacts on a scale of 1 to 5 based on 3 specific criteria.
Okay.
First is severity, so how bad is the potential damage? Second is scope. Is this a localized issue affecting just one town, or is it a global greenhouse gas emission issue?
And the third?
The third, which is arguably the most critical for industrial manufacturing, is irremediability.
Meaning, if we make this specific operational mistake, can the damage ever actually be undone?
Correct. If a chemical runoff permanently alters the biodiversity of a local watershed, that scores exceptionally high on irremediability.
Because you can't just pay a fine and magically put the ecosystem back together.
Exactly. Furthermore, they don't just look at current operations. The framework mandates mapping these risks across very specific time horizons.
So they have to forecast this out.
Right. Short term, which they define as under a year. medium term, which is 1 to 5 years, and long term, extending beyond 5 years.
That seems designed to force the executive board to look past the immediate quarterly earnings cycle.
It absolutely is. They have to anticipate foundational shifts in the physical environment long before they hit the balance sheet.
Which naturally brings us to their actual target frameworks. Because looking at the 2025 numbers, they have set some incredibly aggressive deadlines.
Under what they call their degree framework.
Right, the degree framework. Let's look at their internal emissions first. They have committed to reducing their Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions by 90% by the year 2030.
And just as a quick refresher for everyone, Scope 1 covers the direct emissions from their own factories and vehicles.
And Scope 2 covers the indirect emissions from the electricity they purchase to run those facilities.
Exactly. And according to the 2025 data, they are currently at a 66% reduction.
Hitting a 66% reduction in heavy manufacturing is a massive logistical lift.
It is huge. They are fundamentally rewiring how their facilities are powered and heated globally.
They're also pushing to transition to a 100% electrified fleet by 2030.
Which they are currently at 33% on, according to the report.
But those are internal metrics. The number that really demands attention is their target for Scope 3 emissions.
Specifically, the downstream emissions of their clients.
Right. Siemens has a target to help their customers avoid over 1,000 megatons of CO2 equivalent emissions.
A staggering number.
Now, the 2025 report states they've currently reached 694 megatons.
Right.
Now, let's be critical here for a second. Hitting 694 megatons of avoided emissions sounds fantastic on a slide deck, but how did they actually measure a reduction that hasn't happened yet?
It sounds like hypothetical math, right?
Exactly. Isn't avoided emissions just guessing based on what a customer might have built otherwise?
What's fascinating here is how they validate that math. It is not just a theoretical baseline. It is tied directly to the deployment of a platform they call Siemens Accelerator.
Which is their open digital business platform.
Right. It merges their hardware with AI and digitalization. To understand the avoided emissions, you really have to look at how a digital twin actually functions in an industrial setting.
Okay, walk us through a real-world use case of that. If a client wants to build a new manufacturing plant, how does Accelerator generate a quantifiable carbon avoidance?
Before a single piece of concrete is ever poured, Siemens builds a digital twin of the proposed factory.
A virtual replica.
A hyper-accurate virtual replica. They use AI to simulate the factory's operations under thousands of different variables.
So they're testing it in the digital world first.
Exactly. They model the thermodynamics of the building, the efficiency of the HVAC systems, the stress on the physical materials.
Wow.
Even the exact energy draw of the assembly line robots. By identifying inefficiencies in the digital realm, they optimize the physical design.
So they might discover that by rerouting the electrical grid or changing the building materials?
They can cut the factory's lifetime energy consumption by 30%.
That makes total sense.
And that 30% delta, the energy saved between the standard physical baseline and the optimized digital twin design, is where those avoided megatons come from.
They are engineering the carbon out of the system before the physical product ever exists.
Precisely.
That makes the metric much more tangible. It is macro-level industrial efficiency.
And achieving those numbers isn't just a win for the climate anymore.
No, it is actually becoming a legal requirement to do business at scale in Europe.
Right.
Which brings us to the financial reporting section and a really dense piece of bureaucracy.
The EU taxonomy.
The EU taxonomy. If you work in European markets, you already know this is causing massive headaches for compliance teams everywhere.
It is entirely rewriting the rules of procurement.
But let's break down how Siemens is navigating it. What exactly is this taxonomy?
The EU taxonomy is essentially a strict European rulebook designed to kill greenwashing permanently.
Good riddance.
Right. Before this framework, a company could theoretically paint a diesel train green, claim it was eco-friendly, and reap the ESG investment capital.
Right. The marketing was doing all the heavy lifting.
Exactly. The EU taxonomy changes the game by legally defining the exact scientific criteria an economic activity must meet to be classified as environmentally sustainable.
And the distinction between what is eligible and what is aligned is where the actual rigor lies in this report.
That distinction is everything.
The report shows that in fiscal 2025, 69.2% of Siemens' total business was taxonomy eligible.
Which just means almost 70% of their business operates in sectors that the EU recognizes as potentially green.
Like mass transit or smart infrastructure.
Right.
But here's where it gets really interesting. 52.0% of their total revenue,
Which is massive.
which comes out to roughly 23 billion euros, was officially classified as taxonomy aligned.
They beat their internal target of 45.6% by a very wide margin.
And we should clarify for the listener just how difficult it is to prove alignment.
It is notoriously difficult. Being aligned means you have produced the exhaustive supply chain documentation required to legally prove to European regulators that your specific product meets their stringent scientific thresholds for sustainability.
You literally have to prove it with data.
Right, while also proving you are doing no significant harm to any other environmental objectives. Proving that 52% of a 78 billion euro revenue stream is aligned is an administrative and engineering feat.
Which raises the obvious operational question.
How do you get everyone on board?
Yeah, how does corporate leadership get a legacy workforce of over 300,000 people to actually prioritize the grueling paperwork and precise engineering required to hit those metrics?
The answer is almost always tied to compensation.
Follow the money.
Always. Siemens links 15% of the managing board's variable compensation directly to these sustainability targets.
But the mechanism they use is what is unique here. It isn't just a year-end cash bonus for lowering emissions.
No, it's tied to their equity.
Right. Their long-term stock awards, which vest over a 4-year period, are linked to 2 specific KPIs: reducing CO2 emissions and increasing the number of digital learning hours for their employees.
Tying executive compensation to digital learning hours is a highly strategic operational lever.
It's brilliant, honestly.
It really is. It acknowledges that a company cannot navigate a transition of this magnitude without an entirely upskilled workforce.
Because if you mandate that your global operations must now pivot to AI-driven digital twins and EU taxonomy compliance,
your existing workforce needs to know how to actually execute that software and manage that data.
exactly. By tying millions of dollars in executive stock options to employee education, upskilling stops being a sidelined HR initiative.
It becomes a daily priority for the CEO.
And speaking of executive priorities, let's talk about what keeps risk managers up at night.
The stress tests.
Yes. One of the most detailed sections of this document focuses on climate scenario analysis. We are talking about literal doomsday stress testing.
They take this very seriously.
They are evaluating how the company's 78.9 billion euro business model holds up under extreme global warming.
They utilize incredibly heavy data sets to do this. They test against both physical risks, like a critical manufacturing site flooding, and transition risks, such as sudden global carbon taxes or rapid market shifts away from their legacy products.
So they model these risks across a spectrum of scenarios.
Exactly, starting with the Oxford Economics net zero scenario, which is the optimistic pathway limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
But they also test against the pessimistic extreme, known as the SSP5 8.5 scenario.
Yes, the SSP5 8.5.
Let's focus on that scenario. The report treats this very seriously. What exactly are they modeling here?
SSP5 8.5 is the extreme fossil fuel development pathway. It projects that global temperatures will increase by up to 4 degrees Celsius by the year 2100.
4 degrees.
Yes. In this model, the global economy is battered by severe, prolonged heat waves, historic droughts, massive coastal flooding, and catastrophic wildfires.
And Siemens takes this data and maps it against their entire physical footprint.
Right. And they don't just use internal guesswork. They pull specialized data from the Aqueduct Water Risk Atlas and climate risk reports from Swiss Re.
It is worth pausing on Swiss Re for a second. They are one of the world's largest reinsurance companies.
They insure the insurance companies.
Exactly. Meaning they are the ones who actually have to pay out the billions of dollars when a hurricane destroys a power grid or a flood wipes out a supply chain.
So their models are not optimistic.
No. When Siemens uses Swiss Re data, they are using the most financially ruthless, pessimistic risk models available.
Exactly right. If you are operating a semiconductor fabrication plant, you need massive amounts of pure water.
Right.
If the Aqueduct Water Risk Atlas projects a multi-decade mega drought in that specific region under a 4-degree warming scenario, Siemens has to factor that into their capital expenditure today.
They look at the map and determine if their supply chain will physically break down under those conditions.
Yes, they are looking decades ahead.
It is a bit darkly comedic when you think about it. You have a corporate board meticulously modeling the literal collapse of global weather systems.
Just to ensure that even in a world plagued by chronic climate disasters, their supply chain holds up.
And they can still deliver a solid quarterly dividend to their shareholders.
Yeah, that is the reality of corporate risk management.
So what does this all mean?
It means they are engineering financial resilience. They are actively building new manufacturing sites with these 4-degree climate adaptation measures integrated into the initial blueprints.
So they're assuming the worst.
They are ensuring that even if global climate policy fails and we reach those extreme projections, their revenue streams will remain stable.
Because the world will desperately need the exact adaptive infrastructure and smart grid technology that Siemens provides.
Exactly. The demand for their product actually goes up in that scenario.
It is a very pragmatic way to run an industrial empire. But I want to shift our focus from the environmental modeling to the S in ESG.
The social impact.
Right. Often, the social metrics get buried under the carbon data, but Siemens places a massive emphasis on it, particularly through their healthcare arm, Siemens Healthineers.
The footprint of Healthineers is genuinely staggering when you look at the raw patient data.
It is.
This isn't just about providing administrative software to a few hospitals.
No, it's global health infrastructure.
Yeah.
They set a target to reach 3.3 billion patient touch points worldwide by 2030.
And just for scale, there are roughly 8 billion people on the planet.
And looking at the fiscal 2025 numbers, they have already hit 3.006 billion touch points.
Incredible.
A patient touch point means a blood test run on Siemens laboratory diagnostics or a scan conducted on a Siemens MRI or CT machine.
And crucially, over 1.1 billion of those touch points are specifically in low and middle income countries.
Which requires a completely different logistical approach, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Deploying advanced AI-assisted diagnostic imaging into emerging markets means they are actively building out the foundational healthcare infrastructure for entire nations.
Nations that previously lacked access to that level of preventative medicine.
Right. They're essentially treating nearly half the human population.
And supporting an external operation of that magnitude requires an incredibly resilient internal foundation.
You need the people to run it.
Right. We mentioned their global workforce of over 317,000 people earlier. The social metrics for their own employees are heavily tracked too.
They have to be.
They are aiming for 40 hours of annual training per person, which of course ties back to the executive compensation we discussed.
The digital learning hours.
Yes. They have also successfully reduced their global adjusted pay gap to just 2.0%.
Which is an incredibly tight margin for a legacy company operating across so many different international labor markets.
Definitely. They also actively track employee work well-being, maintaining an index score above 80.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reinforces a core tenet of modern industrial strategy.
Which is?
An organization is only as capable as its human capital. You cannot navigate a global green transition, deploy AI-driven digital twins, or re-engineer a supply chain against a 4-degree warming scenario if your workforce is underpaid, untrained, and disengaged.
The people are the priority.
The software and the digital models are just the tools. The 317,000 employees are the engine that actually executes the transition.
That brings all the pieces together perfectly. Wrapping up this deep dive, the narrative embedded in these 2025 reporting metrics is undeniable.
It paints a very clear picture.
Siemens is not utilizing sustainability as a peripheral PR campaign. It is the core operating system of their 78.9 billion euro strategy.
Driven by data.
Driven by advanced AI digital platforms, enforced to meet brutal EU taxonomy standards, and accelerated by tying executive financial incentives directly to human development and carbon mitigation.
For those of you listening, I would encourage you to apply the double materiality concept to your own industry.
It's a great mental model.
It really is. Move beyond just asking how macroeconomic shifts impact your company's revenue. Start analyzing how your daily operations, your supply chain, and your product lifecycle actually impact the external environment and society.
It fundamentally shifts how you evaluate corporate risk and opportunity.
It really does.
I think that is a vital exercise for any modern business leader. And to leave you with one final thought to mull over today based on what we've uncovered. We saw how a 178-year-old industrial titan can utilize AI to digitally model a 4-degree warming scenario.
Right.
Fundamentally altering its physical product designs while tying its executives' equity directly to employee upskilling in carbon reduction. Take out the sheer scale of that for a second.
It's massive.
If an entity this massive and complex is already operating strictly by these rules, what does that mean for the thousands of smaller mid-market businesses in the global supply chain that haven't even started this process.
That's the real question.
How quickly will unadaptable businesses simply be phased out of existence, not by regulators, but by the sheer economic gravity of these new corporate procurement standards?
It suggests a very rapid market consolidation is coming for those who fail to adapt.
It absolutely does. The standards have changed, and the market is moving fast. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the data. Keep analyzing the trends, stay curious, and we will catch you next time.